What's going on, Mo? It's your boy DameSmiff, and we are out here with another episode of Musician Talks. We're going to be discussing how musicians actually feel about their music. And so, if you guys are excited for this episode, make sure you hit the like button. That way, we know that this video is dope. We can get it out to more people. And then also, make sure you guys hit the subscribe button so you can catch these live streams as they're happening in real time so you can be a part of the conversation, right? So, we're going to go over, as we normally do, a bunch of clips, and we're gonna also try to discuss this from the perspective of musicians in the sense of removing the audience's opinion about the musician. And we talked all this week about emotions and how it affects the music career, and also what it is that really makes a difference when it comes to the things you're focusing on in your music career. So if it's like the audience's emotions, we looked yesterday on how to design a sound stage and how sound really affects emotion, and then juxtapose that with the cost of having to build all of that at the same time. And then the next thing we have to think about is we have to really consider how much of the emotion that goes into a musician about their music that actually matters, right? Throughout the week, we also discussed how the emotions of an artist just in their regular day-to-day life can affect their music, right? So we looked at how Selena and Yolanda's relationship really soured things. We went outside of music and then talked about how Key and Peele's relationship could be soured based on emotions and things like that. But now we're going to look at how the artists feel specifically about the work that they're making. And this can be viewed a few different ways, because sometimes, at least as consumers, we tend to have this kind of entitlement when it comes to things we enjoy, things we like, especially the people. So we'll start to do things and say things that feel like we deserve from these people, but in reality, these are people that are creating something out of their own resource. Like, it's not like someone serving you food based on, whatever your government offers as resources. This is literally like their ideas. Day by day, month by month, year by year, they have to sit down and create an idea and then make it a product for you. So it's a very different sentimental feeling than, let's say, like serving someone a recipe. Okay, the recipe has more sentimental value than the product of the recipe, if you get what I'm saying. Like, so if I was a trumpet player, playing the trumpet is one thing, but playing the trumpet in a certain style to get a specific result or in a certain way has way more sentimental value than the act itself. So let's get into it. We're going to get into the first clip here, and this is really going to be about overarching, I guess you can say, sentiment about your catalog, but it's going to come from the perspective of actually having to defend and actually interpret the value of your catalog. So let's get into it.
Hope everybody's doing well out there this evening. In this video, we're going to be talking about T.I. in his quest to retain or regain the ownership of his masters. Those masters in question being the music that he put out, those albums that he put out during his time with Atlantic Records. So that would be trap music on up to shit. I don't even know the last album he put out. Was it Dime Trap? Because I think the Libra was independent. So he's trying to get his masters back. Apparently he did a deal with a independent company in 2017.
So for those of you who don't know, who are like brand new to this, your masters is essentially the raw original recordings of your idea, right? So let's say if you go into the studio and you record a song on your phone, and then you take it to the producer, and then the producer helps you make it into a fully complete song, and then you get it engineered and mixed and mastered and all that stuff. That end product is what you're then going to sell or distribute with, let's say, DistroKid, your own publishing company, or maybe you'll put it up on CD Baby or stuff like that. But that specific part right there is called the master recording. The other things, like let's say the files on your phones and stuff like that, are all just pieces of this master recording, because this master recording is the specific, I guess you can say, result of your idea. Okay, so this is the complete rendition of your idea. So that's the master. So then now when you think about that process, and then you think about albums, so that's one song. So if you have a 12-song album, there's 12 songs, all of which would be under this album's master, right? Kind of like an umbrella. The next thing you have to think about is how many albums you work on, right? So for rappers, it's kind of easy because we do outsource and delegate a lot of the musical tasks that come to creating the music. But then when you think about just the work ethic, the consistency, and then of course the cost of coming up with consistent quality, it starts to really build its own value just over time, especially if you can then market sales and stuff like sales metrics, right? So now what record labels look for are artists that have valuable masters or catalogs of masters, right? And this can really translate into good income streams for record labels because then they can publish or distribute music, promote artists, and then people who will then interact or participate with the music will then in turn give kickback to the record label because of their partnership, whatever they negotiated. What we're going to look at is how this independent record label negotiated something with T.I. and how this deal actually went for them.
Where I guess they got the masters from Atlantic, or he got the music. I don't know the exact details. I'm going to read the paperwork. He did a deal with them, and there was a clause in the contract that said that they would sell the masters back to him at a favorable price after a certain benchmark was met or something, right?
And so he's kind of like jumbling through that, but essentially what he's saying is that the contract that T.I. had for his masters had a clause in there which meant like a kind of perk to where if the masters reached a certain value, then they can sell it back to him, meaning sell back the rights to him, meaning they don't need to control it anymore because they've agreed that the amount of money that they picked is the amount of money they desire to make from the masters, and they really no longer need the rights if he desires to get the rights back.
He says that it should have been somewhere around the margin of about $3 million.
So that number is set at $3 million.
He's claiming that they tried to sell him his own catalog back closer to the margin of $50 million. Just
okay, so there's a $47 million difference in discrepancy in what they believe this either catalog is worth or something. I don't know where that number jumped up from. So
Clinton. So now he's going down to the courthouse. He's filed a lawsuit and he's trying to get his masters back through this breach of contract clause. And I'm sure he wants some extra out of the deal. I'm not going to waste any time because, of course, we got about 18 pages of material to read through. So let's go ahead and get to this situation. Now, T.I. has been on a good run. Let him know has been doing his thing. Trauma Bomb.
Before we get into the listing of the best songs and stuff, we're just gonna skip past that part. The thing I want you to focus on though is that they're leveraging something, right? And I don't know what it is, but it's something, right? And usually it's something along the lines of like potential value, potential, money's made. But for it to be $47 million difference, I don't know what leverage you think you have that you didn't negotiate for. I think T.I. would have been aware of such a large amount.
Into Atlanta, it's a lot of good things. So, AKA T.I. This complaint
okay, we know who's it
is
so
for breach of contract. All right. Nature of the action.
Okay, so it looks like the record company is called Sync, C-I-N-Q, Sync Records.
Eager to boost his profile in the music industry, Sync acquired from Atlantic Records in 2017 the sound recordings and audiovisual works comprising plaintiff's iconic Atlantic catalog. So I guess they got the music videos and everything too, including.
I'm gonna read this a little bit ahead of him. So, eager to boost its profile in the music industry, Sync, the independent record label, acquired from Atlantic Record Corporation, aka Atlantic Records. Oh, okay. So this is kind of confusing then. In 2017, the sound recordings and audio-visual works comprising of T.I.'s iconic Atlantic catalog, including the worldwide copyrights and all other rights, titles, and interests in all such works. So collectively, like they're saying in that parentheses next, the Atlantic catalog that T.I. made under the record label Atlantic Records. Okay, so Sync sought to obtain T.I.'s consent for the acquisition in a 2017 side letter agreement called the Sync Agreement. To secure T.I.'s consent, Sync, among other things, gave T.I. an option to buy the Atlantic catalog, that is the songs he made on the catalog, from them at a later date based on a predetermined purchase price. So we went over this, right? And it was favorable to T.I. So basically, they could sell it back, but it's supposed to be at max $3 million because it could be worth $50 million, but they can only really charge T.I. for his own catalog maximum of $3 million because that's what they agreed upon, right? So Sync regretted that it had agreed to the formula, and therefore, when T.I. timely exercised the option, which he can do in 2024, which was way after 2017, Sync did everything it could to frustrate T.I.'s efforts to complete the purchase in accordance with the agreement. So basically, they just hurried up and made everything really, really difficult for him, seeing that he's trying to get his money's worth out of his catalog, or at least is using this time, this, I guess, inopportune moment for Sync to get the catalog back. What I think is really happening is that Sync might not have much of other artists to really bank on if they're fighting this hard for this one. They're not really, it doesn't look like they're in an abundance position where they're going to say, you know what, respectfully, let's give the artist what they're asking for. Like they're saying, it seems like there's a regret, there's bad business going on, bad, emotions. They're not being upfront with the number to be surprising him with a $47 million difference, right? So it seems like they're trying to, funnily enough, I just seen news about this earlier, but it seems like they're trying to scalp catalogs, whether it's just from T.I. or from their artists in general. It seems like they're trying to scout catalogs. They're going to basically find record labels who are, looking to partner and merge with them, get their hands on a catalog, and then when it's time to negotiate with the specific artists and writers, then they want to ball their fists up and then bang on the table like some fat mobster, right? So what T.I. really can do here is exercise his leverage, and his leverage is in ownership, which I don't think Sync really understood here, but maybe they have a point if he has written off a lot of the rights. That depends on the details, so we'll get into it.
I.e. until March 2025.
Okay, so he's reading part 2. The Sync agreement required Sync to provide GH. What is GH? I don't know what GH is. With the purchase price for the Atlantic catalog in writing based on the purchase price formula. So the agreement is literally written for them to provide that number in writing. Upon receiving the option exercise, so they're supposed to put that in writing as soon as they receive it, right? Just to say, all right, this is the number we all agree on. This is what we're stamped on. Nothing's changing. It's right there. You see it. I see it. We all see it. Confirmed, right? However, Sync made no attempt to comply with this obligation for 6 months until March of 2025. So in September, he exercised the option to get his catalog back for maximum $3 million. So it could have been less, right? But then they made no attempt to comply for 6 months. So when you're considering this, how do you think you would handle being in that situation, right? Because a lot of people, when they think about like people getting laid off from work, people, like Spirit just went down, so all these people looking for jobs and stuff like that. Imagine the situation where your job is not laying you off. They're still paying you, but then you realize that the thing that really makes your position valuable is now being, let's say, delegated, right? So whereas, let's use Spirit for an example, like you're a pilot at an airline, right? You can see your company going through a merger, right? Months before, or maybe a year before, right? When you start to really consider like, okay, I'm a valued pilot, I got my accolades and my experience, maybe I could shop around my talents, right? But then suddenly your airline goes, well, no, you can't do that. In order for you to do that, you have to, quote unquote, pay the cost to get access to the rights to be able to shop around your talents or look for other jobs, right? And in order for you to do that, we have to base this on a predetermined agreement, which could be a financial number in this instance, right? So let's say in order for you to find a new job as a pilot, you got to pay like a $200 fee just to say, hey, I want to get my ability to market myself back out there as an independent person, right? But then when it's time to do that, let's say in September 2024, you do that, and then Spirit goes, well, oh shoot, well, because you're really valuable and we're actually like about to go out of business, how about you pay us $200,000 so you can go back out into the market? So what would you do in that situation? Now, this is like two completely different industries because one's a creative industry and one is not, but the numbers are real. So like, for example, yeah, you can say, okay, we're just going to wait 6 months and not talk to this dude about this $3 million plus conversation. But then 6 months later, you hit me back with 47 million more dollars that you're asking for. So what am I supposed to do in this situation? Just act like that's normal or something like that. So let's continue to go down the paper. I really am glad he's going through this paperwork though, because it allows us to kind of get a little bit of the details. I was going to make assumptions, but it looks like most of my assumptions are right. So I'm going to try not to make them preemptively. So let's move on to the next part. The formula required Sync to add up a defined subset of revenues it derived from the Atlantic catalog over a specific 1-year period. Deduct from that sum the compensation to which TI were entitled during the same time period and multiply the difference by 12. Knowing this formula would lead a low purchase price because of the limited revenue streams it included, Sync sought to artificially inflate the formula's results. Sync did so by including significant revenue streams that the formula expressly excludes. So what they're doing is they're saying, all right, so we're going to follow this number or this formula to figure out how much of what you're involved with is going to be separate from, let's say, the other publishing companies that have their hands on my music or the other songs and things like that. And so they use that formula, but then they realize that that formula is only focusing on a few streams, limited, I guess you can say avenues for the catalog. And so what they started to do was include other avenues that were clearly excluded. Yeah, it says expressly excluded. So possibly if TI has it written in there that they're not supposed to be including the other streams, then yeah, they were clearly just breaking and breaching the contract, right? And so it says, and by greatly understating the compensation to which TI was entitled, it says, using these tactics, Sync sought to extract a purchase price from TI that was nearly 20 times higher than the price mandated by the parties' agreed upon formula, demanding approximately $52 million instead of the $2.4 million to $3 million due under the formula here. So now we got to think about like, okay, why would someone do this, right? When we're talking about like how artists feel about their music and stuff like that. A part of how people view their music, at least today, is that it is a product, right? It is a product that you can just, exploit and just put out in the market and whatever happens, right? But when you start to think about like branding, ownership, credit, and things like that, that matters a lot more when you get into this kind of conversation because you can see how much more money is moving, right? They're trying to basically, based on this paperwork at least, they're trying to scalp about 47 to 51 million dollars out of this artist, right, for his own idea. The concept of that sounds crazy, right? But then if you think about, let's say this happening in real estate or this happening in like the invention industry or like the wherever you create a new technology or a new process or new service or something like that, right? There's always somebody who's going to try to one up you just based on the capitalism of the opportunity. But they don't really feel the same way about the music or the product, right? So what I'm pointing out here is that a lot of people would look at that $52 million and just say, I can't pay it. And then on the other hand, a lot of people would have looked at that $52 million and wouldn't fight for their music. So we're looking at a really, really, really passionate person being met with another version of passion that goes directly against what they believe. Now, the hard part here is kind of what we talked about earlier in the week is like, how do you know some company like Sync would do this if you sign the contract in 2017 and then in 2024 they're starting to do this, right? Well, honestly, the part that really most artists are going to have to struggle with is that Ti should either have a department or have some kind of like practice where every quarter he audits his record labels and publishers. So like as an independent artist, for me, I don't move as much product and numbers to where it's difficult for me to track this, right? But if I was Ti and I'm moving like millions of streams a month or something like that, it would behoove him to make sure all of these streams are accounted for just for the sake of avoiding something like this. It's kind of like a relationship where you want to basically make sure things are going according to plan properly, not based on how you feel, right? So like a lot of people's girlfriends will be, you know, lazy, not do nothing, or they'll at least feel like they're not lazy and not doing nothing. But then when you actually look at like the actual results of the relationship, most of the time you'll have to really, really audit that, right? And the auditing isn't something that people want to do in the sense of the right thing. They usually want to do it because it feels good and they want to capitalize on it, right? So now what you're seeing in real time, or at least in this document here, Ti is now auditing. Sync is also auditing. But the issue is that only one of them is actually passionate about what it is they came together for, right? And so it doesn't even matter that, like in a relationship, one's going, yeah, but you did this, and the other person saying, yeah, but I do this and you do that. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, the goal here out of all of this was for the both of them to make a decent amount of money and then Ti to maintain his rights. So that means that when you put that in the forefront, how each other feel about this music is really going to drive the, I guess you could say, the clarity of what we're trying to accomplish here. Okay. So since Ti is fighting for basically to get his catalog back and to own his catalog and to make music again, or make money off of his music again, that's the driving force behind all of his decisions. Sync, on the other hand, this is one artist of many. That's why I was like, this seems like a lack kind of mindset. Like they don't really have much going on at the time for them to be doing this specific big of a jump. And then they're also not responding within 6 months time to something as big as like Ti, you know? So it makes me think that their passion isn't really in songwriters, isn't in music, it isn't in really business either. It's in something else, right? So just like in a relationship, it's really hard to figure that out. If, for example, you have like a really, really deep passion and then the person you are also dealing with believes they have a really deep passion because they're doing a lot. Like Sync thinks they're doing a lot right now. They think they're valuable, but the reason they're basing these numbers, or whatever they're basing these numbers on, are fake. So that's the hard part that you have to figure out as an artist, but it comes through how you see how Ti feels about his music. This is what it looks like. If he really didn't give a fuck, he could have just let this go.
So once they figured out that they weren't going to get as much as they would have liked for an artist of Ti's magnitude, they then start trying to inflate the formula. Sync did so by including significant revenue streams that the formula expressly excludes, and by greatly understating the compensation to which plaintiffs were entitled. Using these tactics, Sync sought to extract a purchase price from plaintiffs that was nearly 20 times higher than the price mandated by the parties' agreed upon formula, demanding approximately $52 million instead of the $2.4 to $3 million due under the formula in the Sync agreement.
So yeah, a lot of this too would be about how you feel about your music financially. Like you can put a number on it today, but you don't really know what it's going to be tomorrow. So you can project, right? And usually people who try to do this have some idea of what it could look like based on the data they've had in the past, which makes me wonder why Sync would pick this number if they didn't think that this number was coming down the line in the beginning, right? So let's fast forward a little bit. And I want to get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty of this here contract. Oh, we're buffering. Hold on. Okay, I think we're getting closer. Okay, part of 22 here. It says separate Separate and apart from its financial terms, the Atlantic Agreement underscores the unique value of the sound recordings comprising the Atlantic catalog and the rights, including the worldwide copyrights they embody, in setting forth Atlantic's entitlement to injunctive and other equitable relief, which states, "You expressly acknowledge that artists' services hereunder are of a special, unique, and intellectual character, which gives them peculiar value." Stop right there. What do y'all think that means? Like, if you were an artist and you read that on the record, on the contract, the record contract, and you were about to sign this, what do you think that means? Artist services hereunder are of a special, unique, and intellectual character, which gives them a peculiar value, right? And so the formula that you come up with to determine this value, how much of this key is kept in mind when you're determining that value, which is why I'm trying to figure out where they came up with the other $50 million from, right? So if you're going into the music industry thinking that your artwork is a special, unique, and intellectual, has special, unique, and intellectual character, what number do you put on that to get people to want to do business with you reasonably, but then also to justify what it is you're saying is a peculiar value, right? And so what I think happened was they didn't know who T.I. was in 2017 somehow, right? And then when they found out, the person who's more passionate about making money realized the opportunity, right? Because of what I would have done if I was in Sync's position is I would have renegotiated. I would have tried to at least figure out how to make this make more sense for T.I. to make more money with T.I. instead of ignoring him from 6 months and then trying to gouge him for millions of dollars, right? So it continues on to say that, and that in the event of a breach or threatened breach by you or artist of any term, the condition or covenant hereof, company will be caused immediate irreparable injury. You expressly agree that companies shall be entitled to injunctive and other equitable relief, as permitted by law. To prevent a breach or threatened breach of this agreement or any portion thereof by you or artists, which relief shall be in addition to any other rights or remedies for damages or otherwise available to the company. So all that's saying is that if you breach this contract, there's going to be pretty much irreparable injury to the business, meaning like, financially, there's going to be things that we're going to come for. We're going to come for assets and things like that, right? And so it says the company shall be entitled to injunctive and other equitable relief. So meaning like I said, you can use assets and things like that to kind of justify the cost of what you have to pay off, right? Which you'll see usually like companies having to liquidate assets and stuff like that. But the point here is that this is actually in the agreement, which is confusing as to why they would then act the way they're acting, right? And so here's the Sync agreement. In entering into the Sync agreement in 2017, Sync granted the option discussed in paragraph 1 above based on the following terms. Okay, we figured out who GH is. GH is Grand Hustle. That's T.I.'s record label. I don't know why I didn't know that. Grand Hustle shall have the option to purchase the Atlantic catalog, right? That's what we're talking about. He tried to purchase the Atlantic catalog for $2.4 to $3 million, right? On a quit claim basis and at a purchase price which shall be calculated at a value equal to a 12 multiple of the net profits of the catalog. So we'll break it down here. So the quit claim is basically saying, okay, we want to sever ties, or at least, like I said, with the spirit analogy, is that we now want to look for a different, person to work with, just off the strength of whatever reason, right? And at the purchase price calculated at a value equal to 12 multiples, so 12 times of the net profits of the catalog during the 1 year period commencing on May 1st. Okay, so they signed in 2017. They're good, but then as soon as May 1st, 2023 happens, and then whatever money they make all the way through April 30th, 2024, times 12, the NP purchase formula, That's the amount that they have agreed upon would be the purchase price for this catalog for Grand Hustle to get it back into their hands, okay? So if any of that is confusing, that's the easiest way to understand it, right? Grand Hustle wants to get their catalog back based on a specific window of time that they're calculating for the profits, okay? So that 1 year, the amount of money they made times 12 is the number that he can buy his catalog back, okay? He asked to buy it back. They ignored him for 6 months, and then they said, instead of that number, which is going to be about $2 to $3 million, it's actually going to be 50, because we think we made whatever times 12 that got us $50 million in that 1 year, okay? So it says the term NP shall be defined as gross receipts on an accrual basis minus artist and Grand Hustle's royalty participation. For the purpose of illustration and for avoidance of doubt, by way of example, if gross receipts during this period is $2 million and royalties are $850,000, the NP or the NP purchase formula will then come out to $1.15 million. Okay. And the purchase price would then be 13 million. Remember, you're multiplying it by 12. Okay. 13.8 million. So then he can, just in theory, that would be one of the examples of where he can then buy his catalog back. Where they got 50 from, we don't know, right? They would have to prove that. So let's see if we can go further down. The sync agreement. He's still reading that there. Okay. So the sync agreement prescribes the following procedure to Grand Hustle to exercise the option. Is this telling us what they do? We'll see. Okay, so exercise of the option by Grand Hustle shall be tendering during the option period. Notice pursuant and the notice provisions in paragraph 9, which we've already passed, of Grand Hustle's intent to purchase the catalog. At which point, Sync shall provide Grand Hustle with the purchase price in writing based on the NP purchase formula. And Grand Hustle shall have until the end of the option period to execute a mutually satisfactory purchase sale agreement and pay to Sync the purchase price. So this is just explaining how they're basically going to pay each other, and they just have to basically notify each other like he did in September, and then Sync goes, okay, well, here's in writing what that number is, and then they have to wait for Grand Hustle or TI's team to respond back with the price, and then they just, wire the money to each other or whatever. So it says Grand Hustle timely exercised the option in September 2024, last day of the month, or almost the last day of the month, in accordance with Sync's agreement notice, as we see above. Because the Sync agreement does not define the term gross receipts used in the NP purchase formula, the Sync agreement incorporates, by reference, the Atlantic Agreement's definition of this term. Unless otherwise noted, capitalized terms used but not otherwise defined have the meaning set forth in the Atlantic Agreement. So they didn't define gross receipts. And it says that the Atlantic Agreement defines gross receipts. So because Sync didn't define it, the deal is going to be based off of what Atlantic has said. And it says that the way Atlantic defines gross receipts is that in relevant part, as all royalties and flat fee payments actually earned and received by company in the United States and specifically attributed to the applicable exploitation of the recordings and or videos concerned, which is the Atlantic catalog, okay? So to simplify what you're seeing here is that Atlantic defines gross receipts, which is what Sync is using in their deal, which has not been defined by Sync, as all royalties and flat fee payments actually earned and received by company, which in this definition would be Atlantic, not Sync, within the United States and specifically attributed to the applicable exploitation of the recordings, which means it's specifically attributed to the songs we agreed upon and the music videos we agreed upon, which are from the Atlantic catalog that we are now offering to Sync. So it says that the gross receipts definition excludes at least two significant revenue streams from the NP purchase formula. First, the gross receipts definition bars any license fees that Sync receives from Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, and other digital service providers, because such fees are not specifically attributed to exploitations of the Atlantic catalog, but rather are exploitations of the entire repertoire of musical works under Sync's control. So for those of you who don't understand, we'll read it again. Basically, it's saying that the money that they would get from, let's say, licensing their music to Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, and other DSPs. DSPs are digital service providers that can be any company really, but they offer a digital service. So that can be your YouTubes, your Steams. I'm trying to think of stuff that I use. Twitch, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, things like that. They offer you a service like housing your music, maybe housing your content. Maybe they give you an opportunity to work with chat rooms and things like that, right? Then you have internet service providers where, you have like Spectrum, Cox Internet and things like that, Comcast and stuff like that. So these are just, quick little ways we can just identify these things in today's language without having to, really confuse ourselves with the older versions of this language, right? But essentially what they're saying is those companies for musicians like Spotify, Apple Music, and it doesn't detail the other ones, but I'm sure there's a list. Those companies actually will give you, will offer up license fees in order to get your music up there. And sometimes it's a quick little fee. It's not a lot because depending on what kind of artist you are, they can't really negotiate much, right? Or you can't really negotiate much. So for somebody like T.I., Spotify more than likely came to T.I. for the license, right? Whereas me, I'm paying a distributor to get into like the lower rung, right? So those fees, Sync is not able to take into consideration, which can be any number nowadays, right? But those fees that, like, let's say Spotify is paying to Grand Hustle to get their music license on there, actually covers the entire repertoire, not just the Atlantic catalog, which I believe was the discrepancy that caused Sync to think that they were getting way more than they did. But I don't know. This is just the paperwork. And it says, because it was common knowledge when the parties entered into the Sync agreement in 2017 that audio streaming and video streaming via the digital service providers had become the main driver of music industry growth and revenues, Sync had ample reason to know when the digital service provider license fees exclusion would have significant impact on the NP purchase formula when and if the plaintiff exercised the option. So what this paperwork is saying is that everybody kind of knows that streaming and all this stuff runs the music industry, which means that they also should know that within the writing of this deal, that those same license fees are excluded from what they're doing in the NP purchase formula, right? Which is them talking about the 1 year period of profits that they're multiplying by 12 for specifically the music that they made on Atlantic only, okay? Not the entire catalog and not everything and not all the license everywhere, okay? Multiplied by 12 within that year. That's not what it was. And it says, second, the gross receipts definition prohibits consideration of any revenues from exploitation of the Atlantic catalog outside of the United States. So foreign revenue. So I don't know if there's a Spotify Europe or whatever, but yeah, you can't touch any of the income that's coming from outside of the United States, right? So it says, Sync chose not to modify the gross receipts definition, even though it could have because it drafted the Sync agreement, forecloses any good faith argument that Sync did not. Oh, okay. I'm reading this wrong. I'm gonna start over. That Sync chose not to modify the gross receipts definition, even though it could have because it drafted the Sync agreement, forecloses any good faith argument that Sync did not intend to be bound by any exclusion of DSP license fees, and foreign revenues from the gross receipts, or that sync should not be otherwise bound by the gross receipts definition. So they never mentioned that they were going to use the gross receipts definition in context of the Atlantic catalog. And again, since everybody kind of knows that streaming and things like that is the driving force behind the music industry, they're saying that this kind of removes any good faith to say, oh, we didn't know that we weren't going to use the DSP license fees at all, and we didn't know it wasn't a part of the the foreign revenues. We were just thinking, it was just the whole catalog and things like that. We didn't know that. They can't say that now. And then it says the royalty participation that sync must deduct from gross receipts under the NP purchase formula includes all amounts that sync accrued or should have accrued for plaintiffs as royalty rate compensation and or net profit royalty compensation in accordance with the Atlantic Agreement, or as other contractually required royalty compensation during the formula's May 1st through April 30th, 2024 measuring period. So sync must deduct the gross receipts under the NP purchase formula that include all amounts that sync accrued. So they have to remove what is the royalty participation of the deal from the numbers, because that's not a part of the NP purchase formula, right? Such other royalty compensation includes, without limitation, 50% of the label share of sound exchange royalties paid or credited to sync for exploitation of the Atlantic catalog during the measured period, which royalties sync undertook to pay plaintiffs in the sync agreement. So they're actually taking sound exchange royalties, and it says they have to, part of the royalty compensation includes 50% of those royalties. Okay. And it was credited to sync for exploitations of the catalog during that period. So that basically means that they were using the catalog through sound exchange, and a lot of 50% of the royalties that they needed to pay were actually being used to pay Grand Hustle. And that wasn't supposed to be the deal. The deal was that none of that money was supposed to be touched by sync at all, from my understanding. So sync's serial failures to adhere to its options related obligations. So this is how it goes. As noted in paragraphs 25 and 26 above, Grand Hustle timely exercised the option in September 30th, meaning that they finally could exercise the option to pay to get their catalog back, right? At which point sync was to provide Grand Hustle with the purchase price in writing, like we said, based on the NP formula. And then Grand Hustle would have until the end of the option period to execute a mutually satisfactory purchase sale agreement and then pay, and then they get everything, right? Well, sync did not comply with this obligation under their own agreement to provide the purchase price in writing to Grand Hustle based on the NP formula. Instead of providing the purchase price in writing, sync made no attempt to fulfill its obligation until it sent plaintiffs, Grand Hustle, a purported purchase price calculation on March 25th. So basically, they ignored them, like we said, for a month, and then they just sent them back a whole nother number. Sync dragged its feet for 6 months, notwithstanding the fact that it knew at the time it entered into the sync agreement in April 2017 that it likely would need to go through this process not long after May 1st. Even worse, the March 2025 calculation makes clear that sync utterly and purposely failed to comply with the formula. Sync departed from the formula in order to significantly inflate the price it presented to Grand Hustle, the plaintiffs, expecting that doing so would trigger a negotiation that would yield a better outcome than sync otherwise would be able to obtain had it abided by the parties' agreement from the outset. So basically, they tried to lie and say this thing was making so much money because they were calculating things that weren't supposed to be accounted for. So it does kind of prove that at least whoever's on T.I.'s team, they considered all of this going into the deal, and they kind of trimmed the fat on what it is they wanted to exploit. So that way they can, exercise this option later on and then make a good chunk of change back, but then also at the same time get the exploitation of working with someone who's going to put their music out there. Sync, on the other hand, didn't like that, and they realized, oh man, we're not making as much as we feel like we should, right? So they started stepping out of the deal. It'd be the same where, like I said, in a relationship where somebody feels like they're doing a lot, they're helping out a lot, but they're not. And the reason why they're not is because they're not following instructions. They're not doing what is, told to get done for the agreement, which in this version of that would be to just follow the purchase formula. If you do that, you're fine. But if you don't do that because of how you feel, all this other stuff you think you're doing, like I'm sure Sync feels like they deserve the number they're asking for. I'm sure they feel like it makes sense. And even if they are trying to sneak and like go behind their backs, they feel like this is an option for them, right? And so it's really hard to understand that when it comes to, I guess you can say, musicianship and like being creative. It's just now you have to really think about who it is you're talking to, whether or not they actually understand results too. Like when you're thinking, it's good to tie it back to like relationships, because a lot of times people enter relationships with their own sensibilities and things like that and don't learn to cater. Meaning like the person probably like that's going to hear this more than likely thinks it doesn't affect them, and they're not in the shoes of the person that would be a Sync record label right now, but in reality that is more likely the option. It's easier to exploit people than it is to fight being exploited. So more than likely you have more practice exploiting people than you do fighting being exploited, right? So that's why this is important to look at, because if T.I. and Grand Hustle didn't feel the way they feel about their catalog, they could have just sold it right off. We see artists do that all the time. I think The Weeknd did that with his catalog recently. I don't know the details of it, but you can easily just say, okay, yeah, I think I'm doing good. I think I'm doing it right. I feel good, until you look at the numbers and then suddenly your feelings look different, right? A part of that process is you actually doing what I said earlier, is actually looking at the numbers of what you're actually doing and then paying attention to how you're pulling off tangible results. Like, for example, if you believe you should be, you know, losing weight or gaining weight or changing how your body looks, and you feel like you're doing a lot of stuff and you're not getting the results, then that means you need to look at what you're doing and not look at how you feel about it, right? And that's the part that I think Sync missed. They felt really, 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 really good about this catalog until they didn't. And then suddenly they started behaving differently. So let's go further here. And it says, instead of basing its gross receipts calculation on the limited revenue streams comprising gross receipts that was actually set by Grand Hustle, smartly enough, Sync used a made-up version of gross revenues. Sync included DSP license fees and foreign revenues that Sync received during the measuring period, among other streams. Even though, as discussed in paragraphs 27 through 32, the gross receipts definition expressly excludes these amounts. Sync's departure from the contractual definition of gross receipts resulted in an exaggerated and inaccurate revenue side starting point from which Sync deducted plaintiff's royalty participation, which Sync had also miscalculated. So either they don't know how to do math on there's too many numbers on the calculator, or they are literally trying to just rob T.I. of his catalog, right? And it's hard to tell because they're trying to just claim that they didn't know, right? So maybe they are that dumb and just happen to just ski it on by. But you can kind of see how they got rid of the good faith arguments, because there's so many faulty points right here in Sync's argument. So to drive the purchase price up even further, Sync significantly undervalued the amount of plaintiff's royalty participation during the measuring period. So they even said there wasn't even as many royalties as there actually was. So that way they could, ask for more without having to pay out. Contrary to the NP purchase formula's requirements, Sync excluded from the royalty participation the majority of compensation that plaintiffs received or should have received during the measuring period. Such excluded amounts included, among other things, the entirety of the net profit royalties compensation, SX royalties and other, which are sound exchange royalties, and other royalty compensations paid due to plaintiffs during the measuring period. These additional contractual departures allowed Sync to reduce. I think we got cut off here. Yeah, because that's not what we're talking about. It allowed Sync to reduce plaintiffs' royalty participation far below the amount to which the Atlantic Agreement and the Sync agreements entitled them. So they were actually saying they made way less than they were originally making with Atlantic, which is probably just a debt blame lie. That's not a mistake, right? So by minimizing plaintiffs' royalty participation in this fashion, Sync was able to artificially maximize the NP purchase formula, to which it applied the 12-month multiplier under the formula and come up with a significantly overstated purchase price of approximately $52 million that it presented to the plaintiffs. Now, here's what I want to know. Why did they think this would work? Why did they think that they're basically going to be able to resell or scalp an artist's catalog back to the artist? This makes me think they've done this before. I don't know who Sync is or if they still doing stuff, but I would want to look into other artists that have done this deal with them and see how that process looked as well. Because if they're willing to do this with Tip Harris, T.I., the Trap King himself, then that makes me think that they would do this with little Snooky Snook from Chicago, little dopey dopehead and little crackhead that wants to write a little quick mixtape because his cousin got bullied back in the day. You know, I think it would be very easy to do this with lower level, not as informed artists and things like that. So, upon information and belief, including based on accounts for the measuring period that plaintiffs received from Sync and Sound Exchange, Sync did not earn and receive in the United States during the measuring period any flat payments that were specifically attributed to exploitations of the Atlantic catalog, in whole or in part. The Sound Exchange royalties that Sync earned and received in the United States during the measuring period amount to at least $400,000, half of which Sync was obligated but failed to remit to Grand Hustle. And third, Sync earned and received in the US during the measuring period only a nominal amount of royalties in digital downloads and physical exploitation specifically attributed to the Atlantic catalog. Now that makes me think another thing as well. How much is this catalog really worth then? Because if we look at the numbers naturally and they look low, and Sync started to get worried and wanted to start stealing from their artists and the people they're doing business with, that makes me think that either this catalog isn't doing as well as we would think it is, or perhaps it's just, you know, a trend thing. Like maybe, you know, music just goes up and down. Sometimes music is just like, it's of that decade, so it's just in the past sometimes. So I don't know what that would mean specifically for this. So based on foregoing and upon based on foregoing and upon information and belief, after deducting plaintiff's royalty participation from the measuring period from Sync's gross receipts during that measuring period, the NP purchase formula came up with approximately $200,000 to $250,000, which under this formula yields a purchase price in the range of $2.4 million to $3 million. So if they followed the formula exactly, they would have made about $200,000 to $250,000, right? Which is amazing, right? If you think about it, like if you sold your catalog and in a year's time you made $200,000 to $250,000, that's amazing. And then in the formula, you basically would times that by 12 and then pay that back to the company to get access to the same catalog, which then you can then market out elsewhere, right? But the idea behind this is that the reason why this deal is supposed to work is that all that time they're exploiting to get that $200,000 to $250,000 for themselves. You're making royalty money. You're making all this stuff, which makes the the $2.4 million to $3 million make sense later, right? Which is why they started the deal in 2017. And then way down in 2024, they wanted to buy it back because ideally you would have been making the money with all the other ventures and all the other, you know, agreements and licensing fees is going on there, right? So then you would then buy the catalog back and then reinvest the catalog back into the greater catalog that you have called Grand Hustle, right? But they're trying to impede on that by now charging what seems to be like almost a triple 8 times or something like that crazy number instead of just paying, the deal, which then puts a huge hindrance on the process. Now, with whatever plan you had going on with bringing this catalog back into your reigns, it now gets stunted by this. And so a lot of this, though, this deal is not really the more important part to pay attention to. The more important part to pay attention to is how T.I. and Grand Hustle feels about their music, right? And feels about their work, because most of this work that they're doing is essentially just going to be them defending themselves when it comes to this case. Like, you're just defending how you feel about music and how you feel about the value that comes from it, right? So as we explore a lot of these other topics, when you get through this, I want you to pay attention to that, because that was the most, I guess you could say, tangible financial way to look at it, right? You could look at streams, followers, subscribers, and stuff like that. Like, I recently found out on my gaming channel, I only have 600 subscribers, but the amount of views that channel got is 600,000. So the value that I could place on that could be wherever I place it, right? But when it comes to negotiating it for a number, this looks a lot less emotional, right? And that's the part that I think we needed to see here, that Sync saw a value that T.I. also saw. But how they felt about that value changed how they approached getting that value, right? T.I. was basically honestly looking out for a company by offering you an opportunity to get their hands on their catalog, and then Sync, because they had an emotional feeling about money and opportunity instead of actually helping artists, they decided to try to rob him through the back end, which, funnily enough, is the wrong person to try to rob, being the Trap King. Like, that's he's if he's ever done hand-to-hand business, then somebody trying to rob you is like common. So him catching this and then actually defending himself and fighting against it makes sense for who he is, right? Which is why I'm wondering why Sync would even try this with who that is, which then makes me think that they would try this with somebody who's not T.I. and have probably done it before. So let's get into the next topic. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how artists feel about their music, but I want you to pay attention to this next one, because this one is actually really, really interesting.
Trouble in the city, now you need me, When they say freeze, they mean don't breathe so much. Tell us how you feel. Got brothers my age hugging on the steel, popping off at anyone just to prove they real. Homie, why you popping Zans and popping all these seals? Is it pain that you suffer from? I know just how you feel. Wanting to die, but it's not yourself you wanna kill. Look through the lies, your health ain't worth a dollar bill.
So what we're looking at here, if you wouldn't have guessed, and if you don't know who we're looking at here, this is actually Kamethazine, the rapper Kamethazine, and he made a rebrand, an actual rebrand, right? And what we're looking at here is actually an artist who took how they felt about I'm gonna assume the kind of music they're making, as well as their attachment to the music they're making, and probably how it affected others, and made a complete rebrand that was more, I guess you would say, up his own alley, right? So what we're seeing on the right, that's Kamethazine on the right with the trumpet. What we're seeing is a complete shift in style, complete shift in maturity, complete shift in approach. And I think the approach is the more important thing to pay attention to, because it's something that we never really challenge artists to do. We never really point out the guy who can really rap really, really well and ask him if he can play an instrument at the same time, right? And so the cool thing about these rebrands and trying to figure this out with artists is that you can see more of the human side of things, right? You can see how like a traumatic situation can either uplift or destroy an artist. You can see how stagnation, like in the sense of probably how Kamethazine, or Frank Cole here, as he now calls himself, probably felt about the rap industry and seeing streams and things like that. It can change how you feel about your music. And so for him, similar to probably how I felt in college, he probably noticed how much more value you get from understanding music than you do trying to be popular for performing it, right? And so when he started to understand the music, and again, I'm projecting because I haven't met him, but this is how I've understood this conversation to go with musicians that transition from one instrument to another or one genre from another. But what I would assume had happened is that as he understood the industry more, alongside understanding how to create music more, he started to find his own lane as far as what actually satisfies him, right? So for me, personally, like, I like hip hop, but there becomes a point where hip hop becomes like just words on beats. And that's really hard for many, I guess you can say, hip hop fans to understand, because most of the time, as we spoke yesterday, when you're listening to music, the feelings you get evoked are coming from frequencies, probably science and all kinds of things, right? But the feelings that you come from that are emitted from your life experiences are very hard to find in someone else's song, in someone else's music, or another person's instrument. And I think for him, Mr. Cole here, I think he realized that what he was making probably only fit his circumstance. It didn't really satisfy him. I'll give you another, I guess you can say, metaphor here, where like being told to eat your vegetables, get out of bed and do some exercises and stop lounging around scrolling on your phone. Hearing that sounds great, but how many of you are going to actually practice it, right? And so when you actually practice it and do it for a year straight, maybe 2 years straight, not just funky little 90 days like these little fitness programs, but if you do it for a year straight, the satisfaction you'll feel from that can't be replicated. So in order for you to pull that off, you have to almost become the thing. And I think Frank had figured that out. He was probably a rapper who was really good at rapping, really good at making music, probably had a good situation as far as understanding music for what he was making, but he wasn't getting that satisfaction that he wanted as an artist, which is the difference between being a busker on the street or working in a studio like this with artists that you handpick. And in order for you to get into that position, you can't be the rapper who's with 13 drug dealers in a studio trying to figure out why somebody didn't roll up yet. You have to practice your instrument. You have to clean yourself up. You got to get fit. You got to start eating better. You got to start thinking better. You got to treat people better. You can't do business with companies like Sync. Like, you have to think on 100% level, but it also comes from you. You can't delegate it out like you'll see singers do. You can't be an amazing singer and then expect your manager to make the best decisions on you solely because they're your manager. It's very difficult to do this in this industry. And then when I point it out to people, and I point it out to artists, you get what I was pointing out with the Sync and TI deal. Some people will actually just throw their hands in the air and quit. Other people will relegate themselves to exactly where they are, like a tree stump. Meaning, like, Frank Cole just could have said, screw it, I'm just going to rap, and never changed. So when you look at people close to you who play instruments and they want to, get into the music industry, they call themselves singers and artists, and they want to upload music online, consider what we're looking at right here.
People around here won't give you the time of day. They want you to come out when it's time to play. Lie to your face, all kind of fake. I used to think I had time, not today. It's a shame, it's the game, run a lot of plays. Time is up, better get it, not a lot of days. Now I'm up, when you see me, now you run a game. Okay, so now it's the running game. Yeah, so damn, tell me what you all about. Yeah, I heard through the grapes you be popping at the mouth. Heard you got this agenda between the north and the south. Do you pack that heat? Do you pop them rounds? Yeah, smelling like a good guy with business nigga clout. Yeah, every time I see you do your thing, then you out. Yeah, swim into the loop, call me the chump change trout. Got a lot on my mind and I gotta get it out. So yeah, I can't give you the time of day. Now get into this dough, talking all kind of ways. You wanna take my shine and my music, all kind of things. So you scratching up a contract to take my royalties. I don't play any games any kind of way. Nah, the flow ain't flawless, but I gotta wait. Nah, to make you move like water, babe. Nah, Chardonnay. So back up if you want me to.
Peep the studio. I want you guys to also pay attention to how much effort is going into making the song, right? Rappers could easily, get into the studio and do a couple tracks here and there, but you got to think about how carefully and how meticulously and articulate this music is, okay? And it has nothing really speak to him being a rapper or being, changing or anything. It just has more so to do with how he feels about his music. He's taking it extremely serious. Amidst his girlfriend, admits how people feel, admits how tired you may feel, admits how sad he is and things like that. Admits everything. So yeah, that's a great basic understanding and story of how you feel about your music is really going to transcend what it looks like to the audience. But then at the same time, like we've seen with Selena and Yolanda, I like bringing this example because it's such an extreme one. It can really change how people view you and how people perceive you. And so somebody like Frank Cole doing what they're doing makes a lot of sense for somebody like me, because I do have similar transitions as far as like the variety of things I can do. I can engineer, play wind instruments, I can read music, I can play percussion, I can play piano, I can, perform, I can MC, I can do all this stuff. But the idea of you valuing it the same way I value it, I have to damn near force you to do it, right? So how much of that really plays a role into my decision making, right? Well, for me personally, not a lot, because it would really hinder what I wanted to do, and it also change how you probably perceive me as an artist. Your favorite artists, you probably enjoy them because they give you something you like. If you found out their personal life, it would change a little bit on how you would approach listening to their music. As much as people like to say they separate it, it's really hard to do it when you have specific sensibilities or powerful sensibilities. So what I try to tell artists is that you need to be the source of your creativity. Try not to lean so much on your audience as far as what you feel is right. Know what you feel is right, and then kind of, take it with a grain of salt, however the audience feels. So let's get into our next clip where we actually will explore that point a little bit deeper here.
Do it. And I was like, why? He was like, because it shows us what we can do when we get to that age. But to make it into a entertaining song to where it's just not self-serving, or it's not just like, there's a part of entertaining someone else too. I know I joked about having to go get a colonoscopy and all this kind of stuff, and that's a real thing in my life, but to make that into a song, or
why not?
Like, yeah, of course, but I got to make it into a song that feels good as a song.
But your track record as making people feel good through song is...
Track record is one thing, the right now is a whole nother. I can't put anything else out in the world if I'm not excited about it, because how can I expect you to be excited about it?
So that point is the point that I think Frank Cole realized. He probably wasn't excited about what he was doing to the point to where he saw like being 50 years old doing that, 60 years old doing that, 70 years old doing that. And then at the other time, he probably noticed all the other people doing the same things that weren't as successful when they're 50, when they're 60, and when they're 70, right? So this is why it's been a almost kind of like historical thing for musicians to eventually pick up an instrument, because the instrument has never let us down as far as people's demand from instruments, but also the skill set needed to be good at an instrument is kind of like an athlete. Like, you have to keep practicing it, and it has to be good. You having a hit record in the 90s is not a skill, okay? So the satisfaction most musicians are going to feel doesn't really come from pleasing you as an audience, because you don't necessarily care about the musicality of musicians anymore. We've explored that 2 weeks ago. So now when you're thinking about, okay, what should a legend do? What should somebody who's planning on being in the industry for a living, what should they be considering, right? Well, they can't bank on fan investment, because the fans are struggling with ticket prices. The fans are struggling with understanding the concept of ownership of music because they value the convenience of streaming, the fan isn't really trying to see a live performance if you have people live streaming like I am right here on their phone. So like the idea of you getting dressed, getting out your house, getting your car and family to a venue, and then buying food there so that way you can be entertained and drive back home. You'd rather buy the Taylor Swift DVD, right? And just play it on your sound, on your loudspeaker, right? So when we're considering being 50, 60 years old, what does that look like? That doesn't look like a 50, 60-year-old artist getting up out their house, rigging a 2-3 leg tour, and then performing in front of a crowd of people that's going crazy. That's not what that looks like now. And I think artists are figuring that out because of how they feel about music. They don't want to just make music just for the sake of making music. They don't want to stop. They really care. You can see it with the Grand Hustle versus Sync deal. But like Andre is saying here, if I don't care about the music, it almost feels like I'm not making music anymore. So I'm pretty sure you listen to, heard of, or are a fan of some artist that has made a song or makes music now that they just don't really care about. Like you can tell it's part of the brand, part of the job, part of the occupation.
How can I expect you to think, oh, this is raw? Oh, this is fresh, if I don't feel that way? Like, what's that saying with that drug addicts say? They say, well, the longer I'm out of it, the better chances I have of staying out of it. So
that's not what America wants to hear.
I know, I understand, but it feels that way. Like as I keep going, like it's like you keep slowing down too. Like people don't understand that there's a physicalness to rapping. I always say it's like being a boxer. Like you got to think it's actually like being a boxer. But don't you think the genre is big
enough to encompass all of that?
Look at the greatest boxers now. What do? They do exhibition fights every now and then, but they're not stepping in the ring.
And he's explaining what I'm saying here. It's like, think of a top tier $600 ticket stadium tour. And then I want you to imagine Shaka Khan as the headliner. Like just think for a second, y'all. Like think, like the level of standard that's the demand on her body, on her vocals, on her team, on the consistency. And then you also want her to not use AI, not auto-tune, not use the technology. Like you're demanding so much more that it doesn't make sense, right? And I always point this out to consumers first because they're the ones that really drive a lot of the decisions for these musicians. But fans don't care about the shit I just said. A lot of people will look at that headline of Shaka Khan and then book the ticket and expect to be satisfied. They don't care about none of the shit that goes into that. None of the process, none of the toll. We just watched a video offline watching how the Netflix crew gets fed, and they had one lady running everything, and she was giving them vitamins and all kinds of stuff because she understood the physicality of the job. Fans don't care. They don't know that there's, you have to have clean sparkling water and fresh fruit and like vocal decongestants and make sure there's hot tea. They don't care. Some of them know, but they don't care.
You know what I mean?
What if rapping wasn't boxing? What if it was?
No, but it is though. That's what I'm saying. It is part.
The host is also showing his naivety either to Andre 3000 or hip hop in general, just based on his questions. If you can pay attention to how he's asking these questions, you can tell that he doesn't really understand who he's talking to.
Physical, partly mental. When boxers, when they're about to fight, they have to train. So if I were to make a rap album, the best thing I could probably do is just be around rappers. You know what I mean?
But that's not part of your life right now, really.
Yeah, it's not even like, I don't even like going to the studio and just hanging out with niggas smoking all day. I just don't.
It's gotta be weird to have all that energy directed toward you. People coming up to you on the street or whatever and being like, do this. And you're like, I'm not gonna do it.
I wish I could answer them.
That's a lot of cosmic pressure. It's like being brought to bear on you.
It is. And that's to that point, that title, the first song.
Yeah.
I'm kind of addressing it in a way.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
See, look, bro out here just doing laundry like a regular person wearing camo clothes. Listen, the idea that you think you're going to be a superstar all the time can happen. But look at Andre. He's smiling. Okay, you can do it, but are you going to be satisfied, right? How do you really feel about your music, right? And so when he made this decision to step out of rap, like he was saying, he's just not excited about it anymore. People truly got offended. They felt like, what do you mean you're not excited? Well, the thing was that culturally, where Andre grew up and his influence, like from the South, and then you think about a lot of the artists, if you look at Idlewild all the way back to ATLians, there is a huge influence of instrumental musicians, like vocalists, bands, songwriters. It wasn't rappers. So you can see how he's not attracted to that, right? Even if he grew up with like 3 6 Mafia, Bun B, all these different people, like Scarface, UGK, Killer Mike, like all these people are cool, but they're not his influence. They're like his peers. Like I'm not, like when I see other content creators that are at my level or like near my age and stuff like that, like I don't care. Like I'm not looking at that because they're not my influence. So I think when he realized that, he was like, oh, okay, well, I make way more, I get way more satisfaction out of doing, let's say, playing the piano, singing with my family, or, making music on the spot with instruments, tapping on the drums a little bit here and there. When you think about what the lifestyle of, let's say, the typical engineer or rapper is today, it's a lot of like sitting in a room and thinking about how to go viral, how to catch clout. You're not really creating for the sake of creating. And this is another thing that I point out that a lot of specifically urban artists and urban music fans get upset with. You guys don't create anymore. Like you guys emulate. Like when I listen to people's beats now, it sounds like Lex Luger, it sounds like Zaytoven, it sounds like Sonny Digital. Like I can hear how you bought a sound kit and you're trying to sound like that other person. It's very rare you're going to get somebody that's going to come out the gate with a beat that you never heard of, with a beat that you can't even hum the bass line to, right? So when you hear my beats, that's what I shoot for. Almost every beat you can't recognize, right? But that's an intentional design of my music. For other people, it makes way more sense just to rap on trap beats. It makes more sense just to rap on like drill beats or, Detroit style beats and stuff. It just makes sense because that's what you guys like. Whereas Andre probably felt like, well, if you want me to rap over a drill beat, I don't like drill music. So what I'm going to rap on here is probably going to suck. Like I'm just going to phone it in, right? And he didn't want to do that to you. But you also got offended when he decided not to do it. So this is the part that also is going to have to be a harsh conversation for consumers of music. Do you like trash music? Meaning, do you like music where the artist is just not in it? They don't care. They're just kind of just making a little ditty bop. It feels like a backing track or a reference track. Do you like that music? And if you can admit yes, then you can see why somebody of a high quality standard like Andre 3000 or Frank Cole are stepping away from entertaining you.
Like for me, like washing is kind of like cooking. Like I like seasoned food. Like I hate bland food.
Okay.
So I season my clothes a lot.
We're in our uniform era, is that right?
Yeah, I guess you definitely can call it a uniform. It's easy for me. Like it's kind of like even when I look around now and I look at kind of.
In one note, he does look healthier. Like some of our older musicians and stuff like that, they're aging naturally. You can see he's kind of resisting and defying age a bit here. Without the gray hair, I would think he's like late 30s, maybe like early 40s.
What's happening in the world, like everybody turned up in the late 90s and 2000s. Our contemporaries were looking at us crazy, like who are y'all?
Yeah.
Like y'all are from another planet. Now the planet is here, like all the kids are turned up, what I mean? Like, which is beautiful. I just love this workwear kind of stripes and these overalls. They're very comfortable. I call them like adult baby clothes. You just feel like really comfortable and snug and like you have places to put your hands.
This is yours, these overalls.
Yeah.
What is the brand called?
From now on, they will have no choice but to call us the Ants. This is a workwear brand for sure. And like when you look at Ants, it's like they're always like working. I'm at the stage where I'm loving to do things with my hands.
Yeah.
And things that I can do when I'm 75 years old or when I'm 80 years old.
And the outfit reflects that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think about clothing. Like, I'm at work. Like, I'm actually drawing or painting in these. I still love it that, like, the young kids, they'll come up like, oh, man, your fit is fresh. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you, man.
Do you feel like the uniform is a reminder to yourself about the differences between now and, say, like the year 2000?
It's actually the opposite. It's not a reminder at all. It's a forgetting. I don't have time to think about clothing. Some people, like, go into fashion. Like, I want to be free and, like, do all these things. There's a certain freedom in that, too. But there's also a freedom in not having to think about it at all.
Yep, and this is the part that frustrates most people who were fans of him, most people who are fans of celebrities and things like that, is that what you tied to him, you valued so much, you almost tied it to yourself, which is why I say you guys need to stop relating celebrities to yourself and treat them as superstars, because they are superstars. The thing is, this dude has done on stage, he's a beast, right? But you hear how he's just simply like, man, I just like pinstripes. These look like dope baby clothes, and I just want to use my hands like I can when I'm 75. He sound like my grandfather. And like the clothing line, I think I want to get it right. From now on, they will call us the ants or something like that. I can't get it right. That's actually a dope line because it kind of resembles or parallels what Nipsey Hussle was trying to do with the people who were getting back into society, let's say from prison or maybe a little bit of poverty and things like that. He had a store that sold like t-shirts and undergarments and things like the basics, the necessities, right? And that's a great idea because it solved a problem. And like he's saying, when you think about fashion, a lot of people, it's really self-entitled. Like, I want to be fresh. I want to be the dopest. I want to free myself. You don't have to think about that when you're solving the problem for other people. You can just kind of just be like, you just need clothes. Well, here's some clothes. Like, now don't worry about it. Just relax. Go do what you need to do. You're good. You're fit. We don't even judge you for your clothes anymore. So it's a very freeing feeling for him, but that of which a lot of people don't like. And what I mean by it when I say that is that when somebody is telling you, hey, I'm getting into a new religion and I'm probably going to have to, study more. I'm going to have to take more time in getting into this religion. What it does is it separates the time that you had allocated for them. And it separates probably the feelings that you had allocated for them. That shift can create some kind of like resentment because you now no longer have the freedom and the access to that same person. So like when you see a Frank Cole switch and you came to them for hip hop, now you don't get that anymore. Now you don't get that from that same person you love, but you still have to respect them. You still have to love them and you still have to treat them honestly better because now they're in all hindsight improving themselves based on what they were. But it's difficult for people on the outside to do that when they're losing the thing that they loved you for. So it's kind of like where if you were arguing with your girlfriend a lot and then after a while you was like, you know what, I'm not going to argue. That difference right there could give an opportunity for somebody to resent you for not having the same emotional input. But then also maybe they could respect it because they're like, you know what, that's actually the better option. That's the more mature option. The hard part for musicians is you're doing this with hundreds of thousands of people at a time the minute you hit publish on SoundCloud or YouTube. And so the minute you do that and the song just runs, blogs are talking, your girlfriend's talking, your enemies are talking, the other rappers are talking, and trying to stay ahead of all of that can affect how you feel about your music. So I'm sure Frank Cole, Andre 3000, when they were putting out their last couple, hip hop records, they probably saw how people were like, oh man, I'm about to get that thing I want. And they're like, you're not. This is probably gonna be the last time I do this because I do not feel passionate about this at all or anymore, right? And so that, oh man, I'm about to get it feeling is now met with resentment sometimes. And it's not like, oh man, I don't like Andre 3000 no more. It's just kind of like a turn off, which is why I tell fans of music that you need to be pursuant of the music you like. You need to be opening up Apple Music at least 5 to 10 minutes a day, checking out what's new, seeing what's on there, because these new artists that are coming out, they're really good. But because of how you guys are treating the legends, they're almost damned from the beginning because you're not even investing in music and artists at all on a base level, right? So if you're not willing to go out there and pursue the thing you like, we don't know what to make you. And so when you do land on it and then the person who's making the thing you suddenly like or feel good about decides to make a human decision, like a life choice, like getting pregnant, getting married, maybe they quit, or maybe they want a different genre or something, Lord forbid, bad happens to them, you're not invested and you're not going to see it through like they would have to on their end as an individual. So we got one more and we're going to see how this really ties everything together. And we're going to basically paint an overarching picture of this week of emotions for musicians in the music industry.
So anytime I'm taking on any new prospective clients, one of the first questions I ask is like, what are some of the stories about you that you feel like have not been shared with the world?
Ooh, that's a good question. Because this question right here is kind of what, this is a question that I think many artists, when we're thinking about like whether or not you have the fortitude to be in the music industry, this will make or break you, right? And what I mean by that is that sometimes you'll get on stage or you'll see somebody get on stage and they'll tell like this heart-wrenching story. And it's told in a way that it's from their perspective and they really care about it. And it's like really, really heartfelt. But we just don't care, right? And so that question right there that he's asking, I'm sure a lot of you in your head try to answer this, but then you started to filter out the stories you wanted to hide. You probably started to filter out the embarrassing stories. You started to find the stories where, no, maybe this one would be the one because I came out on top. And that's the part that a lot of artists are going to struggle with, because if you look at somebody like, let's say, a 50 Cent, Jelly Roll, a Jay-Z, even Lady Gaga, when you listen to their actual stories and you see how much trauma they went through, Snoop Dogg being another one, E40 is another one, Too Short, like a lot of artists that we call successful and we think about, oh, I like their story a lot. You wouldn't want to experience it from the first person perspective because there's a lot of violence, a lot of trauma, a lot of addiction, a lot of pain, despair, and sorrow, that of which this man is just asking you to put it on a song and sell for millions of dollars, right? So him asking this question, I pause here because it's a good question, but it's also a question that if he's willing to ask you that, I would like to assume, similar to like somebody getting into a sync deal, I would like to assume that he really cares about the answer you're about to give him, because it would benefit him as well to being, I guess, your A&R.
What are those things like, and why do you feel like it hasn't, right?
Interesting.
And I try to kind of like push them, or like, okay, hey, outside of music, what else do you like, right? Do you like anime? Do you like real estate? Do you invest, right? Like, do you like sports? You know, whatever the case may be, because again, that helps with putting together a strategy of like, what else can we do to share your narrative? If someone's, oh yeah, I was a former college football player. Okay, cool. That's a start. Maybe we can lean into that, because that can allow you to, be able to think through different ideas. Like, for example, we work with Mickey Guyton, obviously, phenomenal country artist, trailblazer in that space. And it was really one time, it was just some casual, I think we had booked her to do the national anthem at the NBA Cup last year. Now it'll be in NBA Cup in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
So we're there, and she mentioned to me like, oh yeah, when I was in high school, I used to play AAU ball. And I'm like, really? I didn't know you were a hooper. So then I went back to the NBA and I'm like, hey, could we have her play in the NBA celebrity game?
Smart.
And because I didn't know, and I'm taking this new piece of information you gave me. I'm like, oh, you hooped, like for real. Like, I was good. She's like, I just tore my ACL. And then, then the NBA was like, oh, let's do it. And
okay, so he's actually really wise of a manager. So he's looking at the music industry as a businessman. Like, he's a really good manager. Now, her playing in the celebrity game, she could be like, oh, I don't want to do it. I'm worried about getting injured again. I'm nervous and shit like that. But removing that aside, him finding the opportunity and just that little bit of information is a skill. That's a skill you need from your manager. That's really dope.
They had her play in the NBA celebrity game. So that's what I mean by also knowing your clients beyond just
You're
the surface
listening.
level. Exactly.
You're listening
Not enough people. A lot of people just listen to talk and say the next thing. Not enough people really listen and process the information.
I want to add one more thing. Process the information, but know how to utilize the information. Like, you ever been in a conversation with somebody and you can tell they're listening to you, and then you get to the end and they just shrug? It's like they listen to you. They got to the end of it, but they don't know how to utilize any of the information you said. They don't know how to respond to it. They don't know how to interpret it verbally. And so they're listening. They're allowing you to speak and allowing you to finish. But then when you get to the end of this, it'd be like at the end of this live stream, this hour and a half plus long live stream, and you have no comment at the end of it. You're a great listener, but you are not useful.
And take every piece of information you're receiving from a client, from a manager, and figuring out, how does this new piece of information help me propel you and you and your client to the next step into further goals.
Yeah.
So I took that piece of information. I'm like, oh, boom, we have to do this. And it turned out phenomenally. And even to, her team had told me that was one of the highest streaming days she had this year, just because it put her in a new audience, in front of a whole big sports audience.
And you see how it then translated into helping her on the music end, right? And this is a country music star playing in an NBA celebrity game. Like this, I wouldn't have guessed to do that, right? But because he's super talented at his, because that's proof right there for me that he knows what he's talking about. But because he pays attention to people, but then knows how to turn what he's hearing into utilization, which most people can't do. They can hear the fuck out of what you're saying, but they don't know how to turn what you're saying into something. He basically gave her a greater push in her music, which in turn exemplifies the other examples we talked about last week, where you want to get out of the studio, you want to live life, you want to go network with people, you want to talk with people. Like there's a reason I got into fitness business instead of just sitting in the gym all day, because it helped me understand how people communicate and how people relate to the things that are emotional factors for their life, like how they see themselves, what they put in their body, and then how other people see themselves or perceive you, and so it helps me understand that from a musical perspective, because now I can understand aesthetics, I can understand emotionalism a little bit more, and I can understand fitness a little better as an artist. What he's doing is next level,
and it came from just active listening, making that comment. I'm like, oh, huh.
From her playing in the NBA Celebrity All-Star Game, that became her highest streaming day on music?
It was a high streaming day of the year for her, from what her team had told me. It was just because there was a lot of people. Huh?
In music.
Oh, and yeah, and her music for this year, for like it was just I wouldn't say it was the highest, but it was just like it was definitely
basically he's saying she got a really, really high peak of notoriety there, which made people go, oh, who's this? And go stream her stuff, which is really good. That's what you want. Because, I mean, you don't expect somebody to listen to your stuff and then suddenly become a super fan, but you do want people to check it out and at least enjoy what they're hearing.
One of the peak days that they identified in their data, because a lot of people, when she's being put in front of this new platform playing in the NBA Celeb Game, a lot of people have been like, yo, let me check this out. Who is she? And then checking out her music, right?
You're right.
So that was one of those times where you actually see kind of quantifiable, like, data from something that you had actually executed. But it stemmed from when we had her doing the national anthem and we're just bullshitting and talking, and you take, she lets that information of how she used to hoop. And not only did we have her in the Celeb Game, but then we had her do a couple sports interviews, as well, where she would to amplify her participation in the game, then talking about how she played
She's also, if he's saying this, if it went as smoothly as he's saying this, she's also a really great artist to work with. You can do this with people in your real life. Like you can actively listen to what they're saying. Like they can be like, dang, I feel like my legs are a little tight and like my leg muscles are tight. And you can give them specifically really good advice because you just actively listen and then utilize the information you got and then give them good information. And then they'll still not want to do it. So she's a really good artist in the sense of either she can visualize what he's saying as well as he can, or she trusts him and is willing and open to be, open to his authority and his leadership in terms of his management. Because sometimes you'll tell these artists stuff like, hey, you need to maybe go on this podcast and do this interview to be a good look because it makes sense for your brand. And because they don't feel the same way, they will reject it. Same thing with movie actors and stuff like that. Like you could tell anybody anything that could be what you would deem good advice, but they would have to, because he probably is talented, he was able to exemplify and show her the value. But part of it is that she would still have to trust him, right? You can't just be like, I'm going to ask a question, and then if I get the answer and I don't like the answer, I'm not going to follow the advice. Like that's not a student. That's not learning, right? Learning would be like, hey man, I used to play basketball in high school, and then he goes, oh, well, you should do the NBA celebrity match. Learning would be like, well, how would that work out for me, right? Versus saying, I don't know, I don't think that would be good. I tore my ACL back in the day and I'm nervous. Like you see the difference in perspectives and language, right? But that's also a practice. So every time you get met with something where somebody thinks it's good advice and you get that feeling of, well, I don't want to do it, or this is tough, or that doesn't sound right. It's a practice for you to stop doing that shit and then actually apply what you just heard to see if it actually works, right? It's a real hard thing. It's similar when you tell somebody to Google something and they're like, no, I don't want to Google it. It's like, well, if you actually do just Google the thing, you can actually get some sort of information and then go from there. But that would be what a student would do, right? Usually somebody who's just stuck in their ways, like an older artist, would probably not want to do what he's offering just because they don't believe that it works or probably don't trust his authority.
AU, and then talk about some of her favorite NBA players. Like we had like Lou Williams and Michelle Beadle interview her, and like Lou Williams didn't know like how much of a fan she was, and she's like, "No, Lou, like I was devastated when you left the Clippers," and he was like stunned. Like, wait, you for real? Like you really know? So it's just one of those things where it's just like where you can be an active listener and you try to push your clients and learn as much about them as possible to figure out and brainstorm new forms of storytelling, new ideas.
Yeah.
Because you're always trying to just reinvent yourself and just bring new thoughts, to the table. But that can't happen without you getting kind of that information from artists. So that's why, I try to push that all the time. It's like, know the people you're representing, push for more information, learn about them outside of the music. What's their true narrative? What are their true interests? Because if they're really interested in something, they're going to be more inclined to want to do it and speak about it from a press perspective.
Yeah.
And literally, Andre 3000 just said that in the last clip. Literally, he was like, if I'm not excited about it, how do I expect you to be excited about it? And that is actually a question that has been answered in marketing over the years, is like how to get people excited about something artificially. Like how do we like force you to like something, right? And so what we've seen is that the people who don't think like Andre 3000 but still want to be successful, well, they'll bot stream or stream bot, or they'll conjure up a fake beef, or they'll do some clout chasing activities online trying to go viral to keep their name popular, right? Versus just doing something personal to them and authentic. Like if your favorite artist, like I love Schoolboy Q. Schoolboy Q started to express his interest in golfing, and I was like, whoa, I'm not into golfing, but that's pretty interesting. And I didn't look further into it, but it does show that he has something in his head outside of freaking rap all day, right? So this was pretty much how we're going to end off the week, y'all. Let me know what you think. This is going to be a fun conversation that we can dig back and look through for the rest of the weekend. Our show continues back on Monday, 9 a.m., Monday through Friday. Make sure you catch it. Tonight, we have the gaming stream starting at 6 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 at the latest. That's if anything goes wrong, right? And then tomorrow is Subscriber Saturdays on Twitch. So if you're in Twitch and you're subscribed there, meaning you're one of the VIPs, we're doing gaming extravaganza tomorrow. So make sure you guys catch up. But like I said, this is Musician Talks with DameSmiff. We talked all week about the emotionalism of being an artist, the emotionalism of being a fan, the emotional side of working as a musician, like what it really, the toll on your body and the toll on your life. Lady Gaga starting out at 14 and then having to run her own tours, movies and things like that on TV and stuff. And then we got into the emotional side of creating music, of what it feels like to actually put your life, your heart, your blood onto paper or on wax or on record, and then have people criticize it with unmitigated just audacity, right? And so what it feels like to actually go through that. So let me know what you guys think. This is Musician Talks with DameSmiff, and I am out, y'all. Peace.